My guest today is Katie Koestner. She's the first woman in history to speak out nationally and publicly about date rape. She appeared on the cover of Time magazine at the age of 18, has given over 16,000 speeches, lectured at over 5,000 organizations around the world, written over 1,000 publications in her lifetime, and is one of the nation's most sought-after experts on student safety and healthy relationships. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak with her today. Katie, thank you very much for taking the time to be here. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Dylan.
So, could you start out by giving everyone a brief background of your story and what inspired you to become a strong advocate for student safety and healthy relationships?
Absolutely. So, when I headed out to college at age 18, I had actually, I guess I was 17 to start with. I graduated from high school in Pennsylvania with huge senior class and was all about going off to start a new 5 hours away from home life at William and Mary and planning to double major in chemistry and Japanese. And then the third weekend I was there at school, I had met this I thought, incredibly amazing, handsome, like could speak three languages fluently, played soccer, played the piano, could sing, like he wowed me. And I met him shortly after orientation, and we started going out here and there, walking around campus, hanging out. And then he asked me on an official date, like restaurant, cloth napkins, reservations necessary. And I had told him that I had never had sex before and was waiting till I was married, and seemed fine with that. But unfortunately, after we had dinner that night, it wasn't one of the cases where he drugged me. You might hear about rape drugs. It wasn't the case where I was wasted. It was really the case that I kept saying no after dinner back in my dorm where we went, and he did not listen to that. And eventually, I became the victim of rape. And back then, Dylan, nobody knew or nobody talked about it. It wasn't like there was high school health classes. There was no
Hmm.
headlines. There was no Me Too movement. There was no like accusations really of anyone. There were just a couple celebrities out there who had been, accused of any wrongdoing in this whole regard. This was the first of its kind, and I certainly wasn't famous.
Hmm.
But after my experience, it just jarred me, Dylan. It just made me feel like a zero, like a nothing, like a ghost, like less than human. And I think I found it within myself with just sort of an internal sense of justice and righteousness so that I could not imagine other humans feeling the way I did. And with trepidation and not knowing what might happen, I had no support really from anyone. My parents were pretty embarrassed, and they said I shouldn't have had the guy in my room to begin with, and I still went and reported him within the week and tried to get help. And I told my RA, and he tried to help me. I told the dean, and she, scared me into silence. But eventually, by the end of the week, I went to the local campus police and told my story, and it was uphill from there. But I guess once I was in it, I was really committed to making sure that I didn't just do any justice for myself. It became much larger. The more I read, the more I understood. I was realizing that no one had, the laws needed to change, the definitions needed to change. Rape was a crime of force, not even consent back then. And so I, at 18, started teaching myself this whole world, and then got fired up and mad and went from college to college and tried changing laws and policies and testifying on Capitol Hill. So that's really the genesis. Is I was nothing more than a college kid thinking life was grand. I was, going to get good grades and go do my own thing. But I think, fortunately, I wasn't willing to stay silent.
Very inspiring. So, prior to your speaking out, there hadn't really been, as you sort of mentioned, a public discussion around the term date rape. So, why do you think people were hesitant to use that term or refer to it in that way? Was it that it wasn't viewed in that context before, or it was just uncomfortable to discuss until someone like yourself finally broke the silence about it?
I think it's a combination of lots of things. We were just a couple decades out from a more modest time, the 50s, and then we started to, unwind as a country in the 60s and 70s. We had more protests about more things and more freedoms for women and other minorities. And I think, by the time in 1990, when my case happened, we were just at the beginning of more women coming into power, more people being willing to say that you're not damaged goods if you're raped, like even being willing to think that. But back when I was in that Time magazine of June 3rd, 91, they pulled the country even at that snapshot in time. And most Americans still believe that if a man paid for dinner, he was owed some sexual favor. Or if a woman dressed in a sexy way, she got what was coming to her. So we were only on the cusp of even thinking about where women and men were in terms of the power and relationships and differences between them. And it was still expected men to be the initiator, women to be the coy, kind of sexy but not sexual beings. And I guess I think it helped that I wasn't drunk and I was a virgin and I was Miss Goody Goody with, great grades. And I was going to say, like, no, I think if I want to say yes, I'll say yes. If I want to say no, I'll say no. And I think my voice should be equally as respected as anyone else's. So I think Time magazine might have snuck the word date in front of rape, not me. I didn't say, oh, it's so nice because I got dinner and a movie out of it, right? Like it wasn't that bad
Hmm.
of a rape. You got a date out of it. Yay. It was more the case that people were starting to say, well, there's this other kind of rape. And back then, I think when people thought of this quote other kind of rape, they thought it wasn't nearly as traumatic, harmful, deleterious as getting raped off the street by a stranger. But I always said, if I had gotten raped by a stranger, I would be scared of strangers, which I, still have concerns about strangers. When you're raped by somebody you already know, already trust, already think respects you, you have to start to say, whoa, do I have to be afraid of everyone? Even people I thought I could trust. And it's not that one's better or worse. It's like any ism. It's not that we can rank things. It's just we have to start to realize that this can happen to anyone in any situation. It happens all the time behind closed doors for people who say, I love you, right after they abuse their victim.
Your audiences have included Ivy League schools, the top 200 officers of the Department of Defense, as well as the men's Division I basketball coaches at the Final Four. So, a very diverse range of people with different backgrounds. So, what has your primary message been to your audience that has remained consistent throughout, regardless of the industry? And does it differ depending on the institution? And also, has your message changed at all over the years, or has it been fairly consistent?
Great questions, Dylan. I'll take the first one first.
Hmm.
I think lucky for me, I was nomadic in my being an agent of change, meaning I didn't care what stage I went to. I was just begging to be allowed in the door. When I started as an activist, I would have to, there were no computers or really
Hmm.
ways to get out the word. I would just literally have to write a handwritten letter or type it on my little typewriter thing and
Hmm.
mail it and say to the dean of some school, please let me come. Principal so and so, please let me come. And sometimes I would get, oh, you can come and talk to our girls. They really need to learn how to dress better, more conservatively. And I was like, okay, if that's what that darn principal thinks, I'll start there. I'll start with anything you can give me. And so I wanted to go to big cities. I wanted to go to small towns. I wanted to go every single space and place because the more I traveled day to day to day, the more I learned from each and every place. Rape doesn't have any bounds. Rape doesn't have any gender. Rape doesn't have any race. It Sexual violence affects everyone, and so I don't know that my message has changed so much in that it's always my personal connection. I really think that when we make any problem personal, when we connect the dots, when we say this is not just your problem, it's our problem, when I can finally say, well, if rape hurts you, what's hurting somebody else? When you start to say that violence and discrimination, it's all one big bad thing. And I think I learned that just going from town to town, door to door, stage to stage, and listening to stories. Thank goodness people would trust me, whether it was at the Pentagon or I had Division 1 basketball coaches come up to me and share their own experiences. One survivor, I was so honored that he told me, a very powerful, incredible, millionaire making coach is a survivor of sexual violence. And I was so
Hmm.
grateful that he shared his story. And same thing at the military bases or working anywhere, corporate America, all the places. It's shocking. I will be giving a speech and at a high school, and I'll go get lunch with the students afterwards in the cafeteria, and the woman in the line, she'll wait until she kind of thinks nobody's hearing, and she'll say, I'm so glad that you came here because I'm a survivor too. I could be at a gas station filling up my rental car, and somebody will, they'll say, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I'll just say one thing, and all I have to do is say, "This is who I am," and I hear another story. Just me saying, "This is who I am. This is what I'm doing," and it's hard. I'm hard pressed, Dylan, not to hear somebody else say that happened to my mom, that happened to my sister, that happened to my uncle, that happened to me. So
Hmm.
my message is still about personal empowerment, connecting the dots, and taking a stand and speaking. Silence changes nothing.
What sort of changes are you advocating for specifically on college campuses, or what are the main problems that you're seeing take place? Is it the perceptions that need to change, or is it policy related? So, for example, making sure that people understand the rights given to them through Title IX, or perhaps there are additional preventative measures that need to be taken by the institutions themselves to provide the necessary education resources surrounding these topics. So, could you just speak about the different approaches that can be taken both on the institutional level as well as the individual level?
Absolutely. So institutions, whether they be colleges, as you mentioned, K through 12 schools, corporations, I always say it comes down to the things I've created over time, like the way I teach. I say there are 4 P's to being proactive in addressing this issue. You have to have good, solid policies. You have to have a protocol in place so that if an incident arises, how are we providing support, resources, advocacy to those affected? What's our procedure for doing justice, doing discipline? And then finally, the 4th P is, what is our prevention strategy? What are we doing to train, educate, inform, empower? Make sure that it's not just window dressing. It can't be just like a quick 35-minute online click through, pre done PowerPoint or clever animations. Like that doesn't
Hmm.
change the world. I hate to say it. Like it takes Spielberg a good couple hours of us glued to a major motion picture to go, "Oh my god, I'm so affected by this." Right?
Hmm.
So who's going to do if Spielberg and some of our finest film directors, they dig in for a couple hours of our time to get us to really feel and emote. So I think it's not a once and done, and it's an over and over and a continued commitment by institutions. And while you mentioned colleges, my latest passion truly, truly has been bringing it down to K through 12s. The
Hmm.
more work we can do to front load our students and our parents to make sure that parents are talking to their kids when they're in 3rd grade, when they're in 1st grade, how do we talk about this when the kids are really little? Like, what if we could say, it's not stranger danger, it's all the time. Like, respect my yes, respect my no. Don't touch people without making sure it's okay with them. Whether it just be a touch of their like cool orange hair. If you have cool orange hair and I want to touch it, I can't just reach out and grab your hair. So
Hmm.
I think to me it's a matter of getting our all of our institutions to be thorough. It's not just, oh, we hired a Title IX director, we're all done. Well, that's one part of that's maybe a hub for the solution. But if you don't end up with all the spokes around the wheel also being informed, also being part of the team, if you segregate out and say, okay, well, athletics is over here and Greeks are over here and orientations over here, so many large institutions start to build walls and not collaborate as well, which is also going to stymie our progress. But I would say I'm really on the road to thinking about the nooks and crannies of corporations too. Some of our bigger ones are doing a little better, but my goodness, our country is replete with all sizes of organizations and corporations. And
Hmm.
how many times have people come to Take Back the Night, our foundation's hotline and our intake form, and it was the woman who was waiting tables, um, a server in a restaurant, or and it was the restaurant that, oh, it wasn't a big national chain. But unfortunately, all of those cases happen. But the lawyers are, if it's not a big name corporation, they may not be quick to take the case when it's only a one off, small time restaurant. So
Hmm.
it's just to me, it's all of us all the time, and then empowering individuals to speak up and speak out. The things that individuals can do is, if you're a survivor, you are not alone. You have a voice. It's going to be scary. I promise. I got harassed. I was scared. My car got vandalized. I got called a zillion names. The protests, the thousands of people signed a petition. It is terrifying, and we aren't going to feel safe necessarily speaking out, but we will not be alone. We may not feel safe, but we will not be alone. So that my thoughts to individuals is stand up, speak out, and goodness knows, like right now, it's so great because I feel like we have so many platforms to use our voices, like this one today.
Hmm. Absolutely. So I wanted to ask you about the Me Too movement specifically, which emerged a few years ago, and it's brought about a lot of bravery and courage as many victims of sexual assault have been encouraged to speak up about their experiences despite very powerful forces and institutions which would otherwise prevent them from doing so. So I wanted to ask you how you would respond to people who might acknowledge that certain people accused of sexual assault might not necessarily be given the benefit of the doubt and are might be presumed guilty until proven innocent. And those same people will also argue that, the implications of false accusations, that's not suggesting that if this is a double-edged sword that one side is necessarily sharper than the other. But I wanted to get your overall reaction to those criticisms that people might have and ask whether or not you think that there are legitimate concerns to be had, or also if you see any of that taking place.
I see it in two ways, Dylan. I see one is the trickle down impact on boys, young men. When I speak at boys' schools, or I'm working with a whole bunch of boys' club groups, like they're their parents, um, and they're called Boys Team Charities. I've been working with a lot of them, and they're the parents of
Mm-hmm.
boys who are 6th to 12th grade. So when I talk to the parents and the boys, they do have concerns and trepidations that I might get falsely accused, or I might get accused of making a joke that I thought was funny and someone else thinks it's sexist. They're worried about being perceived just because their gender identity is male, that they're automatically anti-women. And I say, let's be aware that people might think things. Let's be aware, but it's just like how I, as a female, as a white heterosexual female, try to be mindful all the time of the privilege of the skin I'm in, and the perilousness of also being, I have a greater fear of being raped perhaps than a male, but I also have white skin. I'm not as scared about being treated with as a black male would be, right? So I think when we start to think about, there are all kinds of how you're perceived, and we can roll back to Cuomo in the news recently, right? He's got mounting numbers of people coming out who's saying the way you treated me, what you said to me, the way you touched me made me uncomfortable. His line so far has been, no, I didn't see it that way. I'm sorry that you felt that way. I say, I'm sorry that you felt that way is never good enough, though. Even if we can't prove it, even if there was no witness, at least he's acknowledging that he did have this interaction, right? He's just saying, I didn't see it the way you saw it. That's one level. So, but my concern for Cuomo would be, I didn't see it the way you saw it doesn't mean that he's out of, you know, got a green light now. You've got
Mm-hmm.
to say, oh my gosh, I really had a negative impact on you. I messed up. If I hurt you and you felt hurt, I don't care if I did something I thought was totally fine. If I hurt or harmed or made someone feel uncomfortable or silenced or marginalized in any way, I have to dig deeper and apologize and say, I am wrong. Not
Mm-hmm.
just I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'm wrong for you feeling that way. So I think where we are with Me Too is that we're at least having the conversation. I'm not saying that there aren't any false allegations. I'm not going to say that there aren't people who are misusing the movement, but
Mhm.
I'd rather us keep talking, even if there's going to be. I'd rather silence is worse to
Right.
me. Silence is worse than talking and having some liars.
Hmm.
I hate that we have liars, but I'm going to say we got to start somewhere and we have to get the conversation going and dig deeper. And if we can be honest and really think about the motivations, one thing I would go back to in all of my 30 years of doing this work, Dylan, a lot of the times when an institution is slow to come to terms with its own, I'll say slow to come to terms, good at not acknowledging,
Hmm.
good at covering it up. It's when there's so much power and prestige at some part, for some part, whether it be the athletics department, right? Or whether it be this well touted psychology department at an institution, or a preeminent, if you were assaulted, you go to, let's say you're a student at Harvard and you get assaulted by a professor there, what are you going to do? Go to Yale? Go to Stanford? Are you going to transfer to Princeton? If you're the professor at Harvard and you've worked your tail off and you've been there forever, where do you go next? You have to
Hmm.
say the problem becomes at the very highest levels of our achievement scale, the silence is always going to be the greatest because there's nowhere else to go except down. And so
Hmm.
the people in those situations say, it's a lot to lose, and we start to see it, with the whole scandal around college admissions. It's 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 a long time coming, but eventually things crumble.
Hmm.
So those are my thoughts about the movement and awareness.
So I understand that you have various organizations focused on these different initiatives related to campus safety and healthy relationships. So if anyone wants to support your cause or learn more about your work, where specifically can they do that?
Absolutely. We have tons. In fact, the next thing I'm doing after our interview is leading the charge with some interns and volunteers. We have our foundation, which is Take Back the Night Foundation, and you can remotely, socially distant, get involved. We meet every single weekend with our team of interns. It's incredible. We've had every gender, every race, every age and stage help us. And we do all kinds of awareness raising projects, efforts to improve communications, support survivors, do events and rallies and marches. So that's one way. Certainly, with our campus outreach, we have a team of great, inspiring speakers, survivors. I help personally train them on how to deliver their story with poignancy and poise and still not crumble emotionally while being as vulnerable as they need to be to share that piece of themselves. So you can become a speaker, an advocate, write, blog, all kinds of
Hmm.
ways for to get involved. So our main two sites, well, you can also go to Respect My Red and start a chapter. respectmyred.org is our newer organization that's starting chapters of awareness, groups that want to raise awareness within their high schools and colleges all over the country. So you can start your own club or organization right in your own school and follow us and join us and hold events. We give you all the kits and supplies you need, or join Take Back the Night. Go to an event. We have a yoga event and a national virtual event coming up in the last Thursday of April for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We have at 8 p.m. Eastern to 9 p.m. Eastern. It's free. Um, we hope to have thousands of people from all around the world joining us to listen to survivors and poets and song singers and activists. So come and join us.
Awesome. Well, I greatly appreciate you taking the time to be here today, and I hope that others can benefit from hearing our conversation. So thank you very much.
You are so welcome, Dylan, and thank you. And for all of the listeners, I hope you'll tune into more of what Dylan's doing. It sounds like he has a lot to say and a lot of great ways to give voice to people who hopefully can inspire all of us to do more. So thanks, Dylan. Thanks for hosting me.